Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And thanks for joining us for this virtual event with our friend Jonathan Kellerman, who's going to be talking about his brand new book, Open Season. And we're just remarking what a great cover design it is, very sharp. Jonathan has signed a bunch of books for us, as always, and I'll put a link in the comments field if you'd like to purchase one of our signed copies. If you have questions for John, just go ahead and put them in, and Barbara will bring me on screen towards the end of the hour, and I'll be happy to ask any questions you have. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Well, Jonathan, it's publication day, so I will raise a glass to you.
If I didn't have a cold, I'd have a snort of something.
I would think
We talk about covers. It just reminded me. I've been doing this for 40 years and 40 plus years, and covers have evolved. But in the early days, I didn't know anything about covers. And I remember my third novel, Over the Edge, was very successful and was reviewed in the LA Times by another writer named Dick Lochte. I don't know whether you know
okay.
Dick.
Yep, I
And
do.
and Dick gave it a rave, which I thought was so charitable because we were up against each other for the Edgars, and I won. And he gave it a rave review. What a great guy! And he said, "Great book, one of the worst covers I've ever seen in my life." So since then, I try to be a little more, as I got a little more clout, I try to be a little more assertive. And they've tried different things. And what I've come to find out is I want my covers to be pretty. I
Yeah.
want them to be full of color and a sense of Southern California.
Well, this one does really well.
Yeah. And now they do it first draft is almost always right out of the plate. They're doing great. So
Well, they are. I must say that this beautiful bright blue sky and the sunset eschews all sort of, hints of the fire, but then, you wrote this book long before there was any destruction.
well, all the fires are out. They were going for 3 weeks, and this even during the fires, the skies were pretty blue where I am.
Okay.
So we didn't. I never smelled the ashes or anything like that. It was just, I know, just horrendous for a lot of people.
It was
Fortunately,
terrible for a lot of people.
oh,
And,
it's an
you
apocalypse.
know, hats, people, all the rest of it. And then my mind went to your guitar collection, thinking, that it would be really, in an emergency situation, you'd never be able to evacuate them.
No, I mean, you have to, if something like that happens, you just lose everything. It's a tragedy. It's a personal tragedy, human tragedy, material tragedy. And I certainly feel for the people who've been through. We also have a house in Malibu, and we were spared also because it's divided into eastern and western Malibu. Anything on the west was fine. We were a good 20, 30 miles from any fire. But a few years ago, our beach house was damaged. And I remember evacuating on PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, with Faye and myself and our dog. And it took 6.5 hours to go 30 miles.
Wow.
And the fire was paralleling us to the east. You could to the east, the northeast, and we could see it. We could see flames. And had the wind shifted radically, we could have been burnt up because we couldn't move. We were in traffic jam. It was one of the most bizarre things. I chose to process it as here's an exercise in patience, because patience is not my virtue, and
Oh,
I'm well aware of it. It's something I wrestle with. So I did a pretty good job, but I hope never to repeat that again. So I
well,
consider
I certainly hope you do not. I mean, today there was a very moving photograph. I can't remember where I saw it, but apparently Santorini, there's some volcanic
in
activity.
Greece, yeah.
And they had this tremendous backup of cars, just as you're suggesting. And, there's nowhere to go if you're on Santorini and, except off island. So what do you do?
I'm just reminded of how different the world is due to the interconnectedness. When I was a child, I'm sure the same is true of you. Let's say I spent my first few years in New York. If something happened in Cleveland, we really didn't know about it.
I
If
know.
something happened in LA, unless it was a movie star, we really didn't know about it. Now you're bombarded because let's face it, we're a big planet with billions of people. There's always going to be something happening somewhere, some terrible thing, be it an earthquake or a flood or a fire or a mass murder, and we're just bombarded. When I was a child psychologist, one of my specialties was fear and trauma in children because of my clinical experience working with very physically ill kids. And in fact, one of my first books was a book for parents called Helping the Fearful Child.
Right.
And they talked about what was frightening to watch. The most scary thing for kids to watch would be the news. If the parents had the news on and the parents walked out of the room and the kids are just watching this stuff, they can't process it. So I told parents, you can watch the news, but you have to be there to explain it to them, to contextualize it. So I
Well,
think we're all kind of like those kids now. We're bombarded with all this stuff.
yeah,
It's very anxiety provoking for a lot of people,
it certainly is. I've given
but
up
not me.
Facebook and the I'm giving up both Facebook and the front sections of all the newspapers.
Yeah.
I'm just going for the comics and the bridge
It's,
hand and whatever.
well, I agree. The newspapers, even if they're accurate, it's bad enough. But now it's all clickbait.
Yeah.
It's anything that can get your attention, and most of it's baloney. So it's very hard to know what's true and what's not. Sometimes only the passage of time. I write fiction.
No, but that's one reason I think Joe
Yeah,
Fuller asked me last night because we've
yeah.
had a particularly um, big sales month and whatever. And he said, what do you attribute it to? And I said, I think a lot of it is that people during COVID, people read a lot because they
Yeah,
couldn't go anywhere. I think people are reading a lot because they don't want to watch the news and they
yeah,
don't want to go doom scrolling and all the rest of it.
yeah.
So I think that's good news for books and
I
for
hope so. I hope so. I mean, I think people would like to be able to separate uh, fiction from nonfiction. And as a novelist, I'm telling you, this is fiction. So you know what it is.
Well, it is. And this is an interesting story, Jen. This is
Thanks.
one what got you intrigued in basically we're talking about some shooting deaths and the question is, are they connected? Are they random? And as it progresses, well, I don't know that we want to spoil anything for you,
That's
but
a problem with
what
my
got
books.
you
Everything's a
interested in
spoiler.
that?
I can't pinpoint a specific because the books don't. I'm not a high concept writer. I'm not like the late great Michael Crichton, whose books could all be made into movies because you can sum them up in one sentence. Dinosaurs invade the earth from a piece of amber. My books, and someone's going to ask, why haven't your books been made into movies? I've been asked. I don't know. They're not interested, and I think they're hard to do because they don't spring from one idea. It takes me a long time to germinate a novel, even before I start writing it. And I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. And I also like to take things that are apparently not related and to relate them in a believable way. So I don't know what causes the books. I just spent a lot of time, like for example, I just finished another book, and I sat down in my sick bed with my cold, with a lot of my notes and my files, trying to figure out what I'm going to do next, because I have voluminous files. I used to have a photographic memory, literally when I was a kid. Now I have no memory at all. So I write everything down.
I do
But
know.
but I don't, it doesn't come from one place.
Okay.
You talk about COVID, and I think we've talked about this. COVID for Faye and myself was, of course, it was difficult, but I think we were lucky. It was less difficult for us than for other people because many times we we were at home anyway. We work out of our home. We have a fairly large home and a fairly large property with all the stuff we might want. Of course, we want to see our kids and friends and grandkids, but there were days prior to COVID when I didn't leave the house for 3, 4 days. And I used to feel guilty about it. Like, what's the matter with you? You got to get out a little bit more. During COVID, ironically, I would take one of my cars and there was very little traffic. It was like LA back in the 60s. And I would just go on a mountain road and have a drive. So I actually got out more during COVID than I often did prior to COVID. The other thing is, my editor told me, John, you're the only guy who stayed writing. All the writers folded and withdrew and and I wrote like 3 novels during COVID because why not? I'm home. So I don't want to go through it again. That's for sure. but it wasn't as bad for us as it was for other people.
I think a lot of it is situational. A lot of it was age. A lot of it was, where your family all was,
Yeah,
what kind of work you did. We were
yeah,
extremely fortunate. We did not have to close the bookstore for the staff. And,
that's
we
fantastic.
pivoted instantly to Zoom because we were already doing, online events. And we were able to have, drive-by pickup and we ship all the time. So,
Yeah,
we actually had a more relaxed time at work because,
it's great.
without dealing with people in the
Yeah,
store, we were able to get a lot more done. Because waiting on people, to people, takes a tremendous amount of time, and you don't want to be rude or look disinterested. You don't want to be typing away, while they're standing there trying to tell you about what they read that they really
yeah,
liked. You're
yeah.
going, So yeah, I mean, it was a very productive time for us. I've
It,
always thought that what saved us was that Zoom came along just at that critical
yeah,
moment.
it was great. Well, the speaking of pandemics, I'm just going to get on a soapbox a little bit. Here's a good example of fake news. Pandemics don't occur very often. They're like every 100 years. I don't think we may be more susceptible to them because of the interconnectedness. But the last one was 1918. But I don't think scarcely a week goes by when I don't see some headline: new virus found, fears of new pandemic, new this. Fear. They're always trying to scare people, and it comes to nothing. It always comes to nothing, especially if you understand the science of it. Most viruses don't turn into pandemics, and the more severe they are, the less likely they. Like Ebola. Remember when that was a scary thing? There's no way, because a virus needs hosts. So if it kills everybody, it's finished. So that's why Ebola doesn't become a pandemic. It kills everybody. COVID did what every virus does. The natural history of a virus is to grow progressively more contagious but weaker, which is why, the early strains were so difficult, and now the other strains are not as difficult. So anyway, off the soapbox, we talk about books.
All right. Well, we will talk about, in fact, open season. And as you will gather, so I have said in my reviews that only John could have written this book for two reasons. One, he's a psychologist, and there is, in order to understand what's happening in the book and the reasons why it's happening, I think that a background in psychology is essential. But the other, and he's done it in previous books, but Alex Delaware's partner, Robin, is a luthier. Yeah,
Right.
it's just a word I have to tell you, my spell check didn't know. It didn't like it. I had to confirm that it
Oh,
was an
really?
okay word, right?
Wow.
But, one of the reasons that Alex is able to go off with, is it Milo or Milo? I never can remember. Which way do you pronounce it?
Milo, Milo, Milo,
Okay. All right. So
My,
Alex,
Milo.
okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Anyway,
Yes, Milo. Can you hear me?
uh,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
I don't know what happened there, but anyway, what the reason that Alex can go off with Milo without friction at home from Robin is that she is really absorbed in her work.
Yeah.
She's constantly, repairing, restoring, whatever it is, valuable or even much loved instruments. And I like that, because that's such a problem normally for cops and other kinds of investigators, is that their home life is wrecked by the fact that they're always off working. But Robin seems perfectly cheerful that, whatever he's doing, she's already absorbed in her own work.
She's a self-sufficient person, and I created her for a very specific reason. When I wrote the first Delaware novel, When the Bough Breaks, which was published in 1985, 40 years ago, I decided to fight every cliche in the book. So I said, let's have a couple where the man is dealing with emotional issues and the woman is dealing with power tools. The other thing specifically is my wonderful wife, Faye, who, even though she's trained as a dentist, never practiced dentistry. She, in 1981, decided to try her hand at building a guitar. And she apprenticed with a friend of ours who's a well known luthier. And she created this absolutely beautiful guitar. It's really a masterpiece. Oh, one and only. Never went and did it again, but she was working on the power tools, working with the power saw, doing lacquer, doing everything. Pregnant with our second. That's how I know it was 1981. And that stuck in my memory when I started to write the book. So I knew, and I know something about the world because, as you mentioned, I am a guitarist and I play guitar and I have a collection and I know luthiers. But it's really funny because this one instrument, everyone who plays this says this is just magnificent sounding instrument. She was really good at it, and that happens to people occasionally. There's a French luthier named Robert Boucher, who's a well-known painter, and he started to build guitars in the 1940s in his apartment in Montmartre, and they were great. And he did 150 of them over 50 years, and his paintings go for 10 grand, and his guitars go for 150 grand. So some people just have that golden touch.
That's wonderful. Well, I really like their dynamic,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
it's a stress-free dynamic, and many authors looking to introduce conflict, in order to drive plots and so forth, create a domestic dynamic that is unharmonious. I love that word, unharmonious,
Well,
with a
but that's a cliche. You see, I mean,
oh,
everything, every time you think, it's always a cliche of their family life or they've had a past trauma. And I understand that, but I get really bored with the same things over and over again. So even though I've written over 60 books, I try to, and even though most of them are a series, 40 of them are Delaware. This is the 40th, I think. I try to make each one stand on its own and be different, so you can pick it up and read it without reading the other books. And that's the fun of doing this. That's called creativity. I'm not phoning it in. I don't need to do this. I do it because I love it. And that's
yes,
it.
you do. I know it. I keep waiting for each you announce you're done, and then you tell me you have a new 6-book contract. So,
Well, not
yay.
yet, but we'll see. It's up to the publishers. Publishing is not the fun it used to be, but writing a book is still every bit as much fun as it was when I started in 1980.
Wow,
So,
I'm really delighted to hear that. So
yeah,
this book, the only possible quarrel I would have with you, and I am going to mention it because
go for it.
there are several victims in this book, and they all have, families, loved ones, acquaintances, and so forth. When the book is over and what happened to the people is going to be communicated to those people, there's one family that I really think is going to suffer over it. The person that died at the lake, when, you think back
Oh,
to the
sure,
entire
sure.
dynamic. And I thought, that one really broke my heart in terms of the family of the victim. I mean, we oftentimes in novels, back to cliche, there's like the police knock, then a body is found and somebody is dispatched to tell the sorrowing family or the possibly murderous family relative. You never know for sure. But in this one, that's hard to do given the nature of the plot. But I envisioned when I finished the book, I sat down and I wondered how that was going to go for that particular family. So I figure you did that on purpose, but it really resonates with me even now.
Well, I don't call that a quarrel. I call that a compliment that it affected you, that emotionally it was resonant to you. The other thing, one of the cliches that I've been fighting, that I start to fight, was the British drawing room mysteries. Like people stand around in a summer manner, smoking and drinking martinis while there's a body there. No one's really upset by it. Death, murder are very powerful things. And you have to show the emotional impact. Now, when you finish a book, there's just sometimes you have to end it on a good dramatic point and not go into epilogues. Sometimes epilogues work. It's just a decision you make differently for each book. And Jesse and I just finished another book. Literally just finished it a few. It's called Coyote Hills, and it's got a Sacco Bamo last sentence. It's just a great last sentence because we just want to leave it with a bit of emotional intensity. I'm a pretty intense guy, and I think murder and violence are terrible things. And I don't want to make the books unpleasant. to read, but I don't like when people make light of that stuff. Another cliche you see, especially in the movies, is cops standing around making jokes and being obnoxious about it. I'm sure it happens occasionally, but my experience with homicide detective is they're really sensitive guys and girls. They're really sensitive people. And in fact, in my dealings with them, I have thought often, I think I'm tougher than they are. These guys are really sensitive. And while there may be some gallows humor on some of the scenes, most of them are just really affected by the things that they see.
I think Alex is, he's a tough guy emotionally. I mean,
He
he's
is. He
seen
is.
so much. And I'm not suggesting, there would be no way to show how those people would react to the resolution of the crimes without epilogues. I mean, there just wouldn't be. The other thing is that I've always thought the best books were the ones where you truly mourned the victims.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you have a couple of victims early on in this book that it's very difficult to mourn them because and so I thought the contrast, there's if you have several victims, they're all going to be different. They're all going to have had different lives and different whatever. And I thought the mix of them in this book was really strong.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of times bad things happen to good people. Occasionally bad things happen to bad people. And I can't say too much about this book because it would
Right.
be a spoiler,
I
but
know.
we have a mix of people that stuff happens to.
Well, when you say, because I've already said serial, so when
Yeah.
are serial crimes instead of, a specific crime, there are, yeah, it's going to happen. They're
But
going to,
this is not the typical serial crime.
no.
Usually serial killers are sexually motivated. This has an unusual motive. So I'll leave it
It
up to the
does.
reader to figure it out.
And the thing is, if it's absolutely serial, the only way you can eventually catch whoever the perpetrator is through sort of dumb luck or some kind of science or something, because there really is no motive. There's nothing to tie them together. They're just opportunists.
Yeah.
And I think that's why serial killers fascinate people because they're moving through the world like tigers in the jungle or something just roar. And so to have a serial predator and figure out some way to actually track them down is a hard thing to do, and that's what I think you did in this book. So I kept waiting to and of course you do your usual kind of sleight of hand at the beginning where it's not at all clear where we're going with the book,
Right.
which I like.
That's the
But
idea.
yeah, the
I
other
like to
thing,
slip into a book parenthetically. I don't like, I'm really also put off by the cliche of Bob Smith, the cop from New Orleans, stood on a hill and looked at the body. I always want to slip into things in a subtle parenthetical way. For me, it's all about surprises. I want people to be surprised. They're not going to be entertained unless they're surprised or they're curious enough to turn the page. I like to surprise myself. If I'm surprised, I hope the reader will be as well. And that's what I really try to do.
well, you did certainly in this book. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was you really take us on a driving tour of Los Angeles in this.
Yeah.
And I there's so much time that they are spending in cars on freeways going places, and that's life in Los Angeles, right?
Well,
Um,
it's changed. If you look at the early novels, I'm old enough to have created anachronisms. So the early books have payphones and different things. I'll tell you one thing. Speaking of which, when big things happen, you have to make a choice. Like the pandemic, I made a decision in my books, we're going to ignore the pandemic as if it didn't happen. And the same way I feel about the fire. In my next book's not going to have Delaware driving through the ashes and the ruins. I'm just not going to deal with it. I want to just, it's artificial, but this is fiction. And it's a suspension of disbelief, but that's what novels are. And that's part of their appeal and their attraction and why people like them. So readers, you will hear nothing about these holocaustic, apocalyptic fires that have wrought damage on my city as I've never seen before. It's not going to be in the book.
However, you do point out traffic, which I think
You
is
can't avoid it. I mean,
no.
you can't avoid it. And it's gotten pretty bad here. But you know, a lot of times the cases take people all over the city because it's boring just to be in one block. That's claustrophobic. And a lot of my books, in fact, it's a lot of what people say they enjoy. I just got a letter from someone who said it's like having just what you said. It's like having a map to LA and we're driving through. And the interesting thing is, I'm very naughty because I use real places, but also places that I make up. Because that's what I love about writing fiction. I can do what I want. So
Sure.
I lie for a living. So basically, people come to LA and they try to take a book and they can't find these places because I made them up. So,
But I think you make the experience of trying to navigate LA real. You know,
absolutely. Well, the key
it's
is LA has always been a character in my books,
yes,
and capturing
absolutely.
the flavor of LA is something I like to do. And I'm glad I live here because I think it's a place that everyone all over the world is interested in. So I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate, and it's not an accident that some of the best detective fiction has taken place in Southern California. New York's a great city, but other than Larry Block and a few others, there haven't been a lot of great series set in New York. I don't know why. LA, you know, everyone from Ross McDonald to Chandler to the pulp writers, it's just a great place to set a novel because it's a third world nation, and it's a city where the primary product is fantasy.
Yes.
And that's changed. When my family moved to LA in 59, it the movie business was part of it, but there was plenty of aerospace and plenty of other businesses. It's now become a company town. It's all about entertainment and fantasy and people trying to save themselves and discover themselves. And that leads to some pretty crazy stuff.
Well, it absolutely does. I was going to say that Hollywood or the whole film industry plays a big role in the book. Do you think that, aside from the fiction, do you think that the fires and other things are going to maybe move some of the movie business out? I mean, I know that New Mexico, Georgia, Vancouver have all, been subsidizing movies. I know Outlander, they built a huge, I think Diana said recently there were either four or six theater stages in Glasgow.
Well,
Um,
they've been filming outside of California for the longest time, but the agencies, the producers, the directors, the power brokers, they're not moving.
okay.
They may get a summer home in Montana, but they're not moving. Now, some of them lost their homes. But I don't think they're going to leave LA. They'll just find another place to live in LA, and hopefully, government bureaucracy won't cripple them from rebuilding their homes. But yeah, it doesn't matter where the films are actually shot. It matters where the power is.
Okay. Well, that
No,
makes
nobody gets off. No starlet gets off a bus in Indiana saying, "I want to be a star." It's always LA.
well, excellent point. Okay. So, anything else you'd like to say about open season? We can't really say much because it's
You
one of
know,
the,
I don't like to talk about my book specifically because for me it's surrogate parenting. People always say, "What's your favorite book?" And I always say it's the one I'm working on.
right.
That's the one I'm enjoying. Once I give them up, it's up to my readers. What I do like to emphasize is that I take this job, I love it, but I take it really, really seriously.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate my readers. The only things I really enjoy about publishing are writing the books and knowing that people are enjoying them. The rest of it is the business part of it doesn't interest me. Not at this point in my life. So it's all about inherent pleasure of writing a book, and I'm still loving it. I'm digging it. As I say, Jesse and I just finished a novel. We go back and forth passing drafts. So I had the final draft, and I spent quite a bit of time going over and polishing and writing it, and it was just fun. It was great, and we have a great sense of accomplishment once we finish. I've always believed never cheat the reader. never cheat the reader. If I, just take it seriously. I think part of it helped that I had other jobs. So I wasn't taken up with this, oh, I'm a writer, I'm an English mate. No, no, no. I did other stuff and I've been working since the age of 12. And I published my first book when I was 30, and my first novel when I was 35. And I just take it as seriously as any other job. And I have found that's true of all the enduring writers, be
Mhm.
it Steve King or Dean Koontz. They're all professional about it. It's not like
Absolutely.
movies where you're sitting with your feet up with a laptop on some beautiful place and you're drinking a martini and there's girls all over. It's not glamorous. It's a great job, but it's a job and I love it.
It is a great job, and it's also one that demands you sit your butt in a chair and
Yeah,
actually work on it.
yeah.
And I think some writers, when they become successful, the whole mystique and business of being a writer gets in the way of them actually sitting at their desk and writing.
I think the classic example is Norman Mailer. Norman Mailer was a brilliant guy. No, I think he started at Harvard at 15 or 16 as an engineering major. But he was a very smart guy, and he wrote some really great. He was very, very talented. But when he morphed into Norman Mailer, the persona, he never wrote another good book again. Then he started to write bullshit like, Marilyn Monroe books. And he just stopped writing novels. Once you become the story, there's no story in you anymore. And I think we've seen it in many writers. I don't want to be the story. I don't want to be recognized. I just want to sit and write books and be with my wife, who I love, and my kids, and my 13 grandkids, and my dog, and just turn out as good a book as I possibly can.
But you already made a couple of key statements. One, you were 35 when you published your first novel, but you know, you already had jobs and experience
Yeah.
and an income.
Yeah.
All of
Oh,
which
yeah.
meant that, you weren't desperate about writing.
I
It
wasn't
was
desperate, but I was frustrated because it took me many years to break in. And I had always been told since childhood I was a really talented writer, and I won writing awards in college, and I wrote everyone else's essays for them. And then I published nonfiction and all kinds, everything except full length. I published short stories. It took me a long time to break in, simply because I wasn't good enough. So, once it got good enough, then I got published. But even with that, there's no guarantee you're going to be a successful writer. My
no.
first novel, I've said this many times, I calculated the advance for When the Bow Breaks was $3 an hour. And I had a huge practice in psychology. I think we had the biggest child psych practice in LA. I had three people working for me. I was doing a lot of legal work. I had a good income, very comfortable. And I said, oh my God, I'm now a novelist. I'm not a deluded schizophrenic, but I don't know if I can afford to do this again
Right,
because
exactly.
this took thousands of hours and I got $3 an hour to write this book. It's a joke. And then it became a bestseller. I don't know why, because I never write commercially. And I remember I was seeing patients, and I had three offices. I was in one of my offices seeing patients, shrinks in between patients. It's like a 50-minute hour, 45-minute hour. I'm doing my notes, and my agent calls from New York. He says, John, you're on the list. I go, what list is that? He goes, the New York Times bestseller. I said, oh, is that a big deal? Because he says, you idiot. Yes, it's a big deal. So that was a surprise. That was not expected. And then I said, okay, so I'll do another one. But I didn't believe it was going to last for many years. So I wrote five bestsellers while in full time practice. And then finally I figured, okay, if it doesn't work, I can always go back to my practice, but I can't keep working two full time jobs. It's too much. And I quit psych. I didn't sell the practice. I gave it away to my young associates, very talented people, and that was 1990, and it's lasted. So I've been very lucky, and I appreciate it.
How's the practice done? Has it survived without you?
From what I understand, they all went their separate ways, and those three people have promulgated 40 psychologists. So it's a whole bunch of people who grew from my practice that I began in, God, when did I start? 1976, 1977. Full time 1981. I left Children's Hospital and went to full time practice. So yeah, there's a lot of psychologists all over the country actually who germinated from that practice. But
That's a wonderful accomplishment all by
yeah.
itself, even if you've done nothing else.
Well, it's a rewarding thing, and I did miss it. People always say, "Do you miss it?" I did, because it's going to sound sappy, but I really like helping kids. I really enjoyed it, and back in the days when my email was public information, I would get letters from former patients. And since I was young when I started, don't forget I started my training when I was 22, got my PhD when I was 24, went into practice at 26. So if I'm 22 as an extern and I'm treating a 12-year-old, there's only 10 years between us. So I'm getting middle-aged people writing me letters saying how helpful it was, and it's very rewarding. I had a patient who I had no idea I even helped, and he said, when I was 9 years old, you were my lifeline. So that was really, really touching. It was really sweet. And I had no idea, because over the years you see thousands of patients, you do your best. And usually, you've helped someone, but not always.
Well, I think there are people who probably can't be helped one way or another.
Well, it was mostly in training when I felt that way. Once I was in private practice, one of the nice things about child clinical psychology, practice properly, very high success rate. I had a friend of mine who was a child psychiatrist. He said, "John, let's face it, we do this because we like to feel like heroes, because everyone gets better. People don't realize it's very, very effective. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. I couldn't work a job where I wasn't helping anybody. That would be phony, you know."
And with all this splendid practice under your belt, are you a really good grandfather?
I think I am. I mean, I think I've been a good dad. One thing we're very happy about, and I give Faye most of the credit, if not all of it, I have 4 children who really like each other and are supportive of each other. And they all married people that we really like, and they get along. And the 13 grandkids really get along. When we're together, which is rare because there's like 23 of us now, we just really have a good time. And I know that Faye and I'm not saying we're perfect. Of course, growing up, kids have conflict. We're not like, angels, but in general, my kids are very, very, very supportive of each other, and they love each other. And I know we did a good job because I like the people they all married. And I tell my in-law kids, "You're my favorite kids because you call me dad. I didn't pay your tuition or go through your adolescence." So,
Good
so
point. Well,
so I
Jeff,
think I was a decent dad. Grandpa's easy. That's just easy. Come on, you never say no. And my oldest is going to college, and the youngest is a newborn. So we have all the way down, and I get along with all of them. They're awesome.
right. Well, the only one of your children I really know is Jesse, whom
Right.
I'm extremely fond of. And question, you're still continuing your Clay Edson books? That's the book you just finished, or did you do something different?
We have no. It's a Clay Edison. We have one more on contract. It was a 5-book deal, I think, or a 4-book deal, and then we'll see. We'll just see if Jesse wants to do more, if they want more. You just never know in publishing. It's not like they're jumping. Let's have it. But we have another book to write, and we're in the process of organizing that now from book to book to book to book. Jesse has 5 children,
I
and
know. The
his
twins
wife
probably,
travels a lot.
yeah,
So even with help, he's a busy guy.
he's a busy guy. I think the twins were a real surprise, weren't
Oh
they?
my God, he has 3-year-old twins there, and they're very active, both of them, and they collude and conspire. They're very cute. They're unbelievably cute, but they're a handful.
Yeah, I could well imagine. Well,
Yeah,
Patrick, come join us, see if we have any questions from the audience. We don't want to keep John too long because he's sick.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Always happy to talk.
Let's see here. Um, there's a question which is just what can you tell us about your next book? And you've told us a little.
Well, the next book is called Malice. No, there's another book finished in between that I'm not even going to tell you about, but it's different. It's totally different. It's called Jigsaw, and the one after that is called Malice, and they're just based on for me it's the who done it, but it's mostly the why done it. So it's always about motive, and that's what I'm trying to explore. So I have another Delaware finished, and I just handed in another one.
Wonderful.
How, how
Are
long does
you
it usually?
taking any more standalones, John? Because I mean, you have done a few books that are not Delaware, for
Well,
sure.
Who knows? Right now, what I'm enjoying is writing Delaware. I used to be able to write a couple of books by myself. I'm not. I'm 75 years old, and I don't look at it. I don't feel it, but I am, and I just don't want to work that hard anymore. So if I can do one book a year, it's probably going to be a Delaware, and then I do a book with Jesse, which takes a lot of time too. So probably not in the near future, but I never say never because if a great idea comes, I'll do it.
Got it. I really like that woman that you wrote only one book for her.
Oh, you mean
Is her
Petra?
name
Oh,
great?
which one? The murderer's daughter or Petra Connor? The
Miss
Petra Connor?
Petra, I think
Yeah, well,
that.
I've made her, what I've done with some of the characters, I make them recurring characters in Delaware as I bring her in. In fact, she's in this book. You know, she's a Hollywood detective. So,
That's right.
so the case goes into Hollywood also, and they have to work out their jurisdictional issues.
Maybe it was Grace. Maybe
Yeah,
it was.
Grace Blades.
Yes.
That's the murderer's daughter. I would love to do another one with her.
Yeah.
She was a tough cookie. Maybe one day. I thought that would be a sure movie. I can't. No one asked. So, you know.
Interesting. No, I like Grace a lot. I was really
Yeah,
happy
Grace
with
is
her.
awesome. Some people found her a little frightening, you know, because she's pretty tough.
Yep. Yep. She was great.
Yeah,
I'm
the
sorry,
murderer's
Patrick.
daughter.
I interrupted you. Carry
That's
on.
okay. No, I mean, there is the inevitable question about your wife and if she's
Uh-huh.
going to come out of semi-retirement anytime soon,
I don't like to speak for Faye, but so far I think she's just happy taking a break.
taking a breather.
She's now working on a book. I'm not convinced she's not going to write another one because every so often she says, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do it. But right now, she like I have has been working since childhood, and she raised four children, and she's a very involved nana. They love her. She's a very involved nana. So far, I think she's just digging, relaxing a little bit.
Let's see. Wow, Jesse has 5 kids? I didn't know
Five
that.
kids. Excuse me, my
Wow.
dog came in. What do you want, sweetheart?
Stop. No, it was great. The little white tail came right behind.
She is deaf. She turned deaf, so she tends to moan at me. I'm not sure what she wants. I may need to. I don't know. Hopefully, she when I'm sitting at my desk here writing, sometimes she just wants attention. And Faye's out of town. She prefers Faye is number one. I am number two.
I
So
see.
now I'm number one. So you know.
Well,
Anyway,
Whatever feeds her
any
wins.
exactly
yeah,
any other
so
questions?
yeah, the question that I think is on everybody's mind
Uh-huh.
is, are you still playing the oud? And
Oh, it's only on your mind, Patrick.
it's probably
I,
true.
I am still playing the oud and I love it. I play a lot of guitar. I challenge myself playing classical guitar and playing Bach and Satie and that kind of stuff. And I do like playing the oud. I took a little venture into viola da gamba, so
Oh,
that's been fun too. I like to play music. There she is. There's Colette
there she
behind me.
is. Now we can see her.
So cute. She's
I
a good
She's
think
dog.
cute.
that's really about it. A lot of your fans are just saying how much they love your work and so forth.
Okay.
There was one more I'm trying to find. Sorry, I lost it. Okay, here's the last question from Jell in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh wow.
She would like to know, do you enjoy the research as much as the writing? And do you have a kind of a network of people in the different fields that you're writing about? Touched on that a little bit, but
Research is very interesting. I was trained as a researcher, so I like it. I enjoy it. But it really differs from book to book. Some books require no research because I already know what I'm talking about. I do have people that I can reach out to, and Jesse has people up in Northern California he can reach. One of his very good friends is a police detective there, and he has a lot of contacts. But yeah, I'll tell you a brief story. The most fun research I ever did was for a novel I wrote called Monster, and Monster takes place in a hospital for the criminally insane. And I visited Patton State Hospital here in California, Rancho Cucamonga, California. And Patton State Hospital is a place where people judged too dangerous for the prison system are kept. These are, you know, criminals will pretend to be mentally ill to get out of jail, but these people really are mentally ill. So I got into this place. This is God years ago. Um, by making a deal with a psychologist who worked at it, I would give a lecture to a class of prisoners, inmates. And the exchange was I would be getting a tour of this place, Haddon State Hospital. And she said, the only thing is don't wear tan or brown because you'll never get out because that's what the inmates wear. So I show up and I drive out there. And the first thing she tells me, she goes, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I have a group and they're all veterans and we sing the Star Spangled Banner. And the guy who plays guitar is locked up for beating up a psychiatrist. So I said, hey, I play guitar. So there I am in a room full of homicidal maniacs, like 30, 40 homicidal maniacs, playing the guitar for Star Spangled Banner. So it started off great. And it's funny because they differed from guys who were like the cliche drooling maniacs to people who look like your kind old grandfather. It was all kinds of people. And there were no guards. They were guarded. There were no guards. They were escorted by 2 female graduate students in psychology. So what would stop them from tearing us apart? Nothing, right? So I give this lecture, and I was basically just talking about how I became a writer. And one guy in the back, who I thought was sleeping through the whole thing, drooling with his fly open, says, have you written any bestsellers? And then you have to think, how are they going to process this, So I said, okay, I'll be honest. I said, yes, I have. How many? And I think it was 11 at that point. So it was 30 books ago. I go 11. And they spontaneously break into the most heartfelt, warmest, appreciative applause of any audience I have ever addressed. And then they're coming up to me going, you really helped me because I know I have no talent, but if I put my feelings into writing, maybe it can help me, blah, 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 blah. And you find out the crimes, these were mass murderers and rapists and then I'll just go on a little bit. We're taking a tour of this hospital, and this hospital is a series of locked wards. So you go to ward, you unlock it, you go to the next one, it's like the Pentagon. And the thing that amazed me is they're not locked in their rooms. The inmates are in the hallways, and there's men and women together. There's women sitting on men's laps. It was like something out of Hieronymus Bosch. And this woman who's the psychologist, she's taking me around. All of a sudden, she stops and gets a strange look on her face. I go, what's the problem? She goes, I'm lost. I go, her name was Shobha Srinivasan. I go, Shobha, you work here. She goes, yeah, but I don't go everywhere. I don't know this part of the hospital. And I swear this is true. Some huge guy with long hair and a beard, like a hulking dude, comes out and he says, are you lost? And we go, yeah. He says, I'll take you. And he did. And he did. So that's research. That's the most fun research I ever did. And as I got out of it, I had so much fun. And Faye is phoning me. Are you out of there yet? Are you out of there yet? But it's not always that cool. But that was the best research I ever did.
Sounds like I mean, that's sort of Dickensian, but in a different way.
Very Dickensian.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been to County General Hospital. I've been to the morgue, which they really call the crypt. I've met lots of cops. It's not hard to get all sorts of contacts. But a lot of times I write books that require almost no research. So it really differs from book to book.
Well, thank you, John. It's really been a pleasure, as always, to talk to you.
It's always great to see you. And
thank you. Open season. We actually don't have that many copies left, but
if you need more, we'll sign more. Just let me know.
I will indeed do that. We have a good system worked out with your publisher to do that. So thank you. I hope you feel better.
My pleasure, and thank you, my wonderful readers.
Thank you.